The Asylum, the Rosemond Insane Asylum, the Rosamond Boys Home, the Tuberculosis Hospital, the Antelope Acres Asylum, Rosemond, California. This place has gone through many names, but no matter how you put it, it's always the same location followed by a ghostly encounter. By anyone who visits this place, in every teenage generation someone has been there at night. The feelings of ghostly children, the change in atmosphere is a common occurrence. Many hear the screams of pain carried through the air. Others feel as though they're being followed. This place, for many generations, has scared a person or two a year. But what is this place? Was it a hospital or a detention facility? Did many people suffer the consequences of abuse or torture? Well, let's start from the beginning. The disease. The disease that was hitting in the mid-40s was tuberculosis. In the 40s, medicine and knowledge of the disease was scarce. The methods to treat the disease were primitive. From placing cement bags over your chest to leaving you out in the cold for days on end, tuberculosis, or TB, is one of the oldest human diseases. TB can be spread from person to person, carried by droplets expelled when infected person coughed, sneezes, speaks, or laughs. A century ago, TB was a leading cause of death in the United States. Physicians identified TB by its hallmark symptoms. Emaciation often preceded a difficult death. According to Dr. J.P. Miles Black of Olive View Medical Center, who was medical director of the hospital from 1951 to 1962, recalled a different era of medicine. The public health policy then considered an all-out war against tuberculosis, a war in which the state legislators, local police, doctors, and the public all lined up to do their bit. Many of the former patients who visited had been ordered from their homes, denied access to their families, locked up and subjected to horrifying and probably ineffective treatments, such as having their ribs removed to induce collapsed lung. Those who refused to comply soon found sheriff deputies knocking at their door. They were imprisoned in special quarters in Lancaster. When it came to this disease, there was no playing, and martial law was declared. But not all cases ended in death. Some actually got better and needed a place to stay. This is where Alvin John Antelope Owl Kruger comes in. A 3-year letter man at USC was a sophomore end for the Trojans when they met unbeaten Duke in 1939 Rose Bowl. USC trailed 3-0 in the final 2 minutes when the fourth starting quarterback Doyle Nave came into the game and threw 4 consecutive passes to Kruger, including the game-winning 19-yard touchdown play. He was added to the Hall of Fame in the 90s. He was also a lieutenant for the U.S. Navy during World War II. Kruger played professionally for the Washington Redskins and Los Angeles Dons, served as a naval air instructor during World War II, and ran a sanitarium for tuberculosis patients in Antelope Valley. This place's correct name is Kruger Ranch. They founded the Tuberculosis Sanitarium after serving as a naval air instructor during World War II. Kruger and his wife, Virginia, owned and operated a sanitarium. At one time, the sanitarium housed 60 tuberculosis patients and later served as a boys' home in the 1960s. But this was not your torture chamber that we were expecting of a tuberculosis place. This place was originally an alfalfa farm, and many of the buildings were there. This was a place that you came and finished your care. You were allowed to paint, do crafts, and walk around the farm. Basically, this was a place you came to relax and recuperate while being able to live in your own cabin. Yes, I said cabins. According to our research, only one death happened here that is documented. No teens or children died here, no torture happened. It was supposed to be a place that Virginia and John could take care of the sick. So who died according to court documents? This is what happened. Quote, William Harold Lane was convicted of the second degree of murder of Kashmir Buddha. Defendant and Buddha were patients of the Krugers Sanitarium in Lancaster, which housed about 60 men suffering from tuberculosis. The patients live in cabins. Near the cabins is a recreational area provided with tables and chairs. One of the patients, Manuel Capario, was walking across the recreational area shortly after noon on August the 2nd, 1956. He looked up and noticed Buddha on the ground, in a half-seated position about 75 feet away from him. Buddha was attempting to lift himself up by his hands. Defendant was standing 5 or 6 feet in front of Buddha, whose back was towards Capario. Lane was holding an axe. Buddha took a handkerchief out of his pocket, wiped his forehead, then backed up as defendant followed him. A moment later, defendant walked around a nearby building. Lane was then seen entering his cabin by Paul Miles, who was also a patient. Defendant was carrying an axe. Alvin Kruger, manager of the sanitarium, was summoned by Capario. Kruger assisted Buddha to his office and telephoned for an ambulance. Buddha was in a state of shock and was bleeding from several lacerations on his head. Kruger searched Buddha's clothing but found no weapons. Shortly thereafter, Kruger had a conversation with defendant outside of the office. When asked by Kruger what had happened, Lane said, "Well, I got him. He got what was coming to him." Kruger attempted to question him further, but defendant replied, I got my rights. I don't gotta say anything." F.W. Dornberger, a Los Angeles County Sheriff deputy, arrived at the sanitarium around 1 o'clock. Someone handed him an axe that was wrapped in a piece of blue flannel. He examined the axe and the wrapping for bloodstains, but found no traces of blood. The hatchet had been retrieved from the defendant's cabin by a patient named Taffender. Taffender testified that when he went into Lane's cabin and found the axe resting against his bedside table, he wrapped it in a pajama top and took it to the office. There was no blood on the axe when he saw it in the cabin. After examining the axe, Dorminger went to the recreational area and discovered bloodstains on the ground about 5 or 6 feet away from the table and some chairs. A trail of blood led back to the office. Dorminger then had conversation with defendant. He asked Lane what had happened, and Lane replied that he had an argument with Buddha over a woman. When asked where the argument took place, defendant said, "Over there," but did not indicate any particular place. In response to further questioning, Lane said, "I hit him with a hatchet. It was self-defense, and he pulled a knife on me." An autopsy was performed on the body of Kashmir Buddha shortly after his death. Dr. Chapman, the autopsy surgeon, testified that the death was caused by a skull fracture with cerebral laceration and hemorrhage. In the doctor's opinion, the fracture was probably caused by a blow or struck by a large object. Defendant testifies on his own behalf that he did not know Kashmir Buddha and had never heard of him. On August 2nd, he had breakfast in the mess hall at 8 a.m. He took a short walk, then returned to his cabin to read a newspaper and a magazine. Around 10 o'clock, he, quote-unquote, blacked out and did not recover consciousness until sometime in the afternoon, when he found himself sitting in a police car. Dr. McGinnis examined defendant once in October 1956. He gave his opinion that Lane was suffering from an emotional disorder, but was legally sane both at the time of examination and at the time he committed the offense. These were the details of the only murder that happened there. Maybe the haunting of Mr. Buddha, who was so close to being cured before he was struck in the head. Maybe Lane's blackout that he claims happened was caused by something unknown. We do know that someone was killed on the property. We also know that it was later turned into a boys' home for troubled teens. Either way, Mr. Kruger passed away in February 20, 1999 at the age of 79 due to losing a battle with cancer. Not only did he serve our country, but he also lent a helping hand when he could. From this, many legends have come to be formed, and suburban legends and myths have come. Reaching even further back in time, however, the property was first purchased in 1923 by Herman and Doris Kruger. Doris was a German immigrant and Herman was the son of German immigrants. The property was a working alfalfa ranch. In the late 1930s or early 1940s, Herman and Doris added the tuberculosis sanitarium to the ranch. The cabins, mess hall, and kitchen were built by their sons, Raymond and Alvin. During the early days of the sanitarium, Ray and Al ran the alfalfa operations and Herman and Doris owned and ran the sanitarium. The patients who came here were sent from Olive View Hospital to complete their recovery. The only known death was the one here. When Herman and Doris divorced, Alvin stepped in to help manage the sanitarium along with his mother. The sanitarium operated until the opening of the Mira Loma Hospital in approximately 1960 and 1961. Ray moved his family to Antelope Acres and Alvin moved to Lancaster, where he would own and operate a gas station. The property was never an insane asylum. An interesting side note, John Kruger, son of Raymond and Frances Kruger, was a small boy and lived on the ranch until the family eventually moved. He would go on to become a Los Angeles County Marshal and worked out on the Lancaster courthouse. He said that, according to official county records, the first recorded felony charge at the courthouse, numbered F1, was the attempted murder at the Kruger Ranch. F1 would be followed up shortly by F3, which was a charge of homicide for the same incident after the patient had died from his injuries. Pictured here are Herman and Doris Kruger on their ranch in the 1950s. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. If you have visited this place or have any stories or other information, please leave a comment below. And a special thank you to producer Slap Happy for the music. Thank you all so much for hanging out. I'll see you in next week's video.